On enchantment. I've had an enchanted life, and now at the age of 80, I still am healthy and my wits are mostly around me, and I'm reflecting back on that enchantment. By enchantment, I mean the magical intersection of this material, ordinary world with a parallel world which you enter. And that world is one where the rules are different from this world and where you feel a deeper sense of involvement and excitement and mystery, a sense of wonder and mystery within it. My first experience of enchantment, I imagine, was as a child. As Wordsworth put it, heaven lies about us in our infancy. Not for everyone, but certainly my Indian infancy was enchanted, filled with the world of Mowgli and the Jungle Books, with animals and smells and sounds that were greatly exciting for my imagination. And my mother in particular was a great weaver of spells, telling me stories and encouraging me in my fantasies and games. So I had an enchanted sort of childhood at that stage, and then when I came back to England, it continued in Dorset and to a certain extent at boarding schools. That is to say, it wasn't always pleasant. Enchantment can be unpleasant and frightening and so on. But basically I felt integrated, and at any moment I could just go off in my imagination. In my reading, I could become one of the outlaws with William, just William. I could become one of the outlaws with Robin Hood. I could go off on the journeys with my favourite writers like Arthur Ransome, Swallows and Amazons, and so on. So I played games in my imagination with my toys and with my books, and that was a kind of enchantment which interwove all the time. I was doing ordinary things, getting my breakfasts or having my breakfasts and doing schoolwork and so on. But a lot of it was enchantment. And it was when I went to the Lake District and moved into the valley where William Wordsworth was educated and wrote his account of disenchantment, which is what his long poem, The Prelude, is about. It's about how you lose the enchantment as you grow older. The magic in the rocks and trees and stones begins to fade in your teenage years, and as a poet in later life he tried to recall that and re-enchant himself, and that was the aim of many of the great romantic poets, English romantic poets, particularly John Keats and Shelley and Coleridge. So I wandered the fells of the Lake District and Yorkshire moors where I went to school and read the poetry and had my first love affairs, learnt to play guitars, and this was the Elvis Presley era, and it was semi-enchanted, but I felt the enchantment fleeing away, beginning to dissolve. My certainties began to dissolve, and I felt I was becoming slightly disenchanted. Modernity, with its rationality, its divisions, its coldness, was enveloping me. I was having to become an adult, in other words. And that continued at university. And there, with my first real love affairs and the beauties of Oxford and discovering new poetry and new excitement in my work, there was still a great deal of enchantment, but I resigned myself to becoming disenchanted. I began to hear the idea of disenchantment in sociology associated with Max Weber, the disenchantment of the world. And I accepted that our modern West, our adult, rational West, with its scientific revolution and industrial revolution, was disenchanted. Then I went to Nepal as a field worker in anthropology in my middle 20s and came on an enchanted world. There was shamanism, there were ancestors, the trees, the rocks, the stones, the waterfalls were all filled with spirit. There was no separation of this world from another world, and everything was enchanted. And I suddenly realized my own life didn't have to be like that. It wasn't the only case. And reading anthropology, I came across many other enchanted worlds. But I thought, well, these are disappearing. These are small groups on the edge of modern rational civilizations, and they'll soon disappear. But when I went to Japan, as I began to understand what was lying there below the surface of very modern technology and vast cities, I realized that Japan also was enchanted, that every tree, every garden, every piece of pottery had spirit in it, kami, not little elves or brownies or anything like that, but a force. And so the Japanese had not separated off the world of something other, and they could easily slip into it back and forth, as you see in Miyazaki's cartoonist's films like Spirited Away, which is a perfect example of movement into enchantment. But Japan was Japan, just an island, and it was really only when I went to China a little later that I came across a civilization which at first, again, was going through a vast economic transformation and looked very modern in its cities. But as I went on investigating it, I found its deep Taoist, yin-yang, ancestral spirits, and a special form of Buddhism, which means that, again, China is enchanted. Weber himself recognized this and described it as a magic garden. And it's filled with magical things once you scratch below the surface. So when I came back here, I looked around and I found, to my surprise, that if you take enchantment as this moving out in the imagination from your humdrum world, much of our lives also is enchanted. The arts are all enchanted. When you listen to music, when you look at a painting, when you read a poem, many of the arts are about that process of enchanting the mind or the eye or the ear. And that many of the games we play at enchantment, whenever we play a game, whenever a child says, let's pretend, you are entering into a kind of enchantment. And it spreads out into so many other things, watching television, falling in love, drinking good wine, all through our lives, and of course in our dreams and sleep. We live in parallel worlds of disenchantment, of rationally getting on with things, and a sense of something deeper, more meaningful, and integrating in our lives. And so my life went through 3 phases: enchantment, an apparent disenchantment, and then as I grow older and move towards the final enchantment of death, I have rediscovered the wonders of enchantment. And looking behind me at the books there, every one of them is a portal into another and exciting, enchanted, perhaps, world. So this is the theme of much of my life, and I've written several books recently with the title of enchantment in them. And I hope that you also experience more than you really realize the joys, pleasures, mysteries, wonders, excitements, and sometimes terrors of enchantment. Thank you.